The forest is a magical place, a paradise for tiny animals, full of unknowns and adventures. But at the same time, it can also become a terrifying place. It's like a master shapeshifter, making it difficult for anyone who enters to get out. Yet humans are like a bunch of unruly children, carelessly treating this magical forest. They cut down trees, destroy the homes of countless creatures, hunt wild animals, steal their food, and even their lives. If one day the forest were to become angry and decide to punish the destroyers, how terrifying would that scene be? Just thinking about it is enough to send shivers down one's spine. Zana is a strong woman. Although married, she is like a single mother because Simon is always busy and indifferent to the family. Thanksgiving is approaching, and she plans to take her son Benji to his grandmother's house to celebrate together. Before leaving, she hasn't given up hope. She called Simon, hoping he could pick up their son, but he made an excuse about being busy with work, completely dashing her hopes. He had promised to pick them up, but at the last minute he broke his promise again. He even used the excuse of it being too much trouble to avoid it. Afterward, they got into the car. On the way, Zana chatted with the driver in a humorous way. Hearing that she was about to take her son to meet his paternal family, he sarcastically remarked that the most difficult people to deal with are sometimes other people's families. He also mentioned that his own family was powerful, and his motto was to avoid them if possible. Suddenly, a car from the opposite direction sped towards them and nearly crashed into their car. Zana lost the mind to talk. She turned around and saw Benji's face was pale, and he looked unwell. The sudden collision had frightened Benji. She quickly told the driver to pull over. It turned out the boy was carsick and wanted to vomit. They hadn't even arrived yet, and they'd already encountered so much trouble. This trip was definitely not going to be smooth. After Benji finished vomiting, his small body was still trembling. He looked up, his big, round, sparkling eyes gazing at his mother. He innocently asked why his father hadn't come to pick them up. Zana felt a little sad hearing this, but she forced a smile and awkwardly explained that Simon had very important business and couldn't come. After comforting Benji, she prepared to put him back in the car to continue their journey. But as soon as she turned around, his eyes were drawn to a scene by the roadside. A bird lay motionless on the ground, its breath of life long gone. He instinctively turned his head to look towards the forest shrouded in thick fog. A strange feeling welled up inside him. It seemed as if something in that mysterious deep forest was secretly watching them, carrying with it a sense of unease, mixed with a touch of fear. Zana didn't notice Benji's fleeting confusion. She helped him into the car. Soon, the atmosphere in the car became more lively as the driver began to talk. Seeing Benji's pitiful appearance, the driver couldn't help but remark that the boy looked exactly like his own son. But in that warm moment, a dramatic turn occurred. The driver's eyes were suddenly drawn to a scene ahead. An extremely strange deer was staring at them with a fierce gaze, then charging straight towards the car at an unprecedented speed. Its speed and posture truly resembled a wild beast out of control. Before Zana and Benji could react, they heard a loud crash. The bizarre deer, like a messenger of revenge, slammed into their car. The driver, however, was quite responsible. He immediately tried to remain calm and asked if everyone was all right. Zana was about to reply when suddenly she saw huge legs pass outside the car. Before she could react, the frenzied deer launched another attack. It kicked violently at the car's body with its hooves. Its two front legs stomped straight onto the hood. The three people inside were in terrible agony. They were trapped in a rickety metal cage. The poor driver in the front seat bore the brunt of the impact. His arm was dislocated, and the pain was so intense that he gritted his teeth and his eyes widened. Seeing the car about to be completely destroyed, Zana knew she couldn't wait any longer. She mustered all her strength to kick open the window and pull Benji out from the back. The moment they escaped, the deer rammed into the car again. This time, the driver was gone. In an instant, he was gone forever. The deer stood majestically on the wrecked car, looking down at Zana and Benji as if declaring its victory. When the two turned around, they were stunned to see a deer even bigger than the car. A chill ran down their spines. After the initial shock, their survival instinct finally overcame their fear. They hurried away, hoping to escape that terrifying place as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, at Benji's grandmother's cozy house, everyone had gathered, waiting for Zana and Benji to return. They had even grilled a delicious steak to welcome them. Benji's grandmother stood outside the door, her gaze distant, constantly muttering, "Bambi, Bambi." Harriet could only shake her head and help her inside. Suddenly, there was a loud rush of footsteps outside. Zana and Benji finally dragged their tired, disheveled bodies back. Harriet still didn't know what had happened. She angrily pointed to her wrist, implying they were too late. Elsewhere, several hunters were driving along the edge of the forest, their guns at the ready. A sinister smile and greedy eyes were etched on his face. He seemed to be plotting something sinister in this forest. At this moment, Zana recounted the entire terrifying ordeal she had just experienced to everyone. The shocking events left everyone stunned. The initial warm family atmosphere was instantly shattered, replaced by an unprecedented tension attention. After some discussion, Harriet concluded that the situation was too dangerous, and staying home was the best option. At this point, Zana discovered that Benji's leg had been injured during their escape. Meanwhile, at the scene of the accident, several hunters with guns were scouring the area with ulterior motives. Suddenly, one of them picked up a phone, presumably Zana's, that had fallen during her escape. He even taunted her, remarking that the person in the picture looked quite pretty. Suddenly, a deafening roar of an animal echoed through the deep forest, instantly alerting the hunters. Instinctively, they raised their guns, their eyes filled with wariness and unconcealed fear. Meanwhile, in Benji's grandmother's living room, she was lost in her own world. Holding a paintbrush, she meticulously sketched one Bambi picture after another. Her brush strokes were frantic and distorted, as if possessed. She mumbled incomprehensible words. Her eldest grandson, Harrison, sat beside her, annoyed by her behavior. Seeing her distraught state, he impulsively grabbed a soft pillow and threw it at her. Zana intervened, reprimanding Harrison for his rudeness and cruelty. In another development, several hunters armed with guns moved through the fog-shrouded forest. Their eyes revealed urgency and ferocity. They were clearly searching for a target. However, their brutal hunt inadvertently led to another tragedy. When Benji's uncle went out to check on the driver, he unfortunately fell into their search area. In that moment of life and death, he was mistaken for an uninvited guest by this frenzied group of hunters. He was then killed on the spot. Finally, Zana finished treating her son's leg wound. She stood up, intending to go back to her room, when her eyes inadvertently glanced at a painting hanging in the hallway. It was a work by Benji's grandmother, depicting a large, strong deer. Zana's steps involuntarily halted before the painting. Although the painting was abstract, she felt a strange sense of familiarity. The deer in the painting and the deer they had encountered in the forest, whether in its demeanor or anything else, bore an astonishing resemblance. At that moment, Andrew approached. Zana looked at the man beside her with suspicion, her tone questioning the painting. Andrew calmly replied that he didn't know either. Elsewhere, the three hunters were utterly astonished. They had thought themselves the masters of this forest. But the scene they had just witnessed made them realize they had made an irreparable mistake. They had accidentally shot someone. The unexpected turn of events left all three flustered, their minds in turmoil. Their survival instincts compelled them to first take the corpse back to the car. What to do next would be decided later. Elsewhere, Zana returned to her room, intending to wash her face and use cold water to dispel the chaos and fatigue in her head. But when she looked in the mirror, she was once again terrified. A giant deer appeared in the mirror. Its sharp eyes seemed to be staring at her, making her whole body go numb. At the same time, Benji, engrossed in playing a game in the living room, vaguely heard his grandmother muttering something incomprehensible. Curious, Benji looked up and asked a question, but Harrison immediately blurted out that she had lost her mind. As soon as he finished speaking, she seemed to sense something. She suddenly turned off the lights in her room and stood alone by the window, her gaze heavy as she looked out at the dark night sky. Seeing her actions, Benji noticed the sketchbook she had left beside her and, out of curiosity, picked it up to examine it. All they saw in the sketchbook were countless drawings of deer of all kinds. Strangely, all of them resembled the giant deer they had encountered in the forest. Benji was about to ask his grandmother why she had drawn these things when suddenly a bird flew by and fell to the ground, startling them both. When he looked up again, he saw the giant deer standing there, motionless like a ghost from another world. He panicked and shouted for his mother to come and see. Benji hoped Zana could also see the deer, but when she rushed to the window and looked out, the giant deer silently vanished, as if deliberately mocking them, leaving only the poor little bird dead on the ground, as if subtly conveying some kind of warning. However, this bizarre scene didn't end there. The very next second, the giant deer reappeared, charging straight towards the house. With danger imminent, Zana didn't have time to think. She yelled for Benji to run. The other three members of the household heard the loud noise outside and initially laughed, thinking it was just cats and dogs. But when they peeked out and saw the giant deer charging straight at them from outside, they were all instantly terrified. It was no longer a deer. It looked exactly like a monster, and screams echoed through the night. Harriet, unable to bear the overwhelming fear, suddenly darted out from behind the cupboard. She screamed as she ran to the next room for a safer hiding place. But just as she entered, the giant deer smashed through the door, its destructive power overwhelming her. In a panic, she tried to climb out the window to escape, but the deer immediately rammed its antlers into her. Meanwhile, the rest of the household, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, panicked and rushed to the car, preparing to flee this hellish place. However, fate seemed to be playing a cruel trick on them when the car, which was so crucial at this moment, wouldn't start. While everyone was gripped by extreme fear, Harrison suddenly realized his mother had disappeared. Before anyone could fully comprehend what was happening, Harriet, who had just escaped, was being relentlessly pursued by a huge, ferocious deer. She struggled to run towards the car. In its fury, the deer charged charged at Harriet with its sharp antlers, instantly tearing her body in two. The horrific and brutal scene left everyone in the car speechless. Their faces turned pale, and all that remained was fear and despair. At this critical moment, a miracle occurred when the car unexpectedly started, but the giant deer showed no sign of giving up. It continued to chase them closely behind. In his panic, Harrison threw the car's contents out at the deer. Seeing this, Xana had no choice but to close the car door and pull the boy back inside. This action only attracted the beast's attention and made it even more aggressive. Finally, the deer caught up with the car. It used its enormous body to repeatedly ram into the fragile truck, creating deafening noises. Everyone in the car frantically urged Andrew to drive faster to escape. But at that critical moment, the gear shift suddenly jammed, preventing the car from accelerating. The large deer was about to catch up to them again. After a series of violent collisions in this desperate situation, Xana had an idea. She and Andrew put all their strength into pushing the jammed gear shift. Finally, with their combined effort, the gear shift was pushed up. The car's speed surged, and it sped away like a bullet. In a split second, they escaped the terrifying deer. Everyone could finally breathe a sigh of relief. It felt like they had just taken a trip through the gates of hell and returned, escaping the Grim Reaper's scythe at the last moment. But on the other side, the situation was even more brutal when the three hunters, after dealing with the scene, went to the house where Xana and the others were staying. After searching the house, they went outside and found Harriet dying. The woman who had once been so full of life was now barely clinging to life. After a brief moment of hesitation, one of the hunters ruthlessly drew his knife and coldly ended Harriet's life. Meanwhile, Xana and the others were driving frantically through the dark forest when suddenly their path was blocked by a fallen, ancient tree. Andrew angrily slammed his hand on the steering wheel. He couldn't contain the despair welling up inside him. He screamed in rage at the dire situation, blaming Simon for everything. Simon had dragged them here and caused this series of tragedies. Then he chose to disappear at a critical moment, putting everyone in danger while he himself remained unharmed. When their anger reached its peak, they resigned themselves to their fate, got out of the car, and struggled to move the tree blocking their way. A massive tree blocking their path was clearly no joke. However, that fragile piece was quickly shattered. While everyone was still busy, a huge deer suddenly appeared ahead, causing Benji to recoil in fear. With no other choice, Benji slammed on the gas pedal. The car sped off like a bullet. This sudden escape led to a great tragedy. Worse still, poor Andrew was trapped by the rope tied to the tree trunk, and he was dragged forward by the car. After a short distance, the car and the giant deer seemed on the verge of a horrific collision. But right before everyone's eyes, the deer suddenly changed direction and fled like a professional stuntman. It skillfully glided past the speeding car, leaving Harrison standing frozen in place. He watched helplessly as the car, dragging his father along, disappeared into the darkness. Just as he recovered from the shock and thought the danger was over, the terrifying scene repeated itself. The large deer that had just run away suddenly turned and charged straight at Harrison. Harrison had no choice but to rely on his survival instinct to flee. In a panic, he cleverly hid behind a large tree, but the giant deer was like a seasoned hunting dog. It constantly sniffed around, following the scent to find Harrison's tracks. He carefully waited, intending to sneak away while the deer was distracted, but after just one step, he accidentally stepped on a dry branch on the ground. That small sound immediately alerted the deer. His hiding plan completely failed, forcing Harrison to continue his escape. However, at that critical moment, this unlucky fellow accidentally fell headfirst. Even so, Harrison's quick thinking could be considered a stroke of luck in this misfortune. Seeing the giant deer charging towards him, he came up with a desperate but effective plan. To lie still and feign death, he tried to transform himself into a mud-covered corpse, thus escaping a terrible fate. In contrast to Harrison's luck, Andrew, who was being dragged behind the car, was not so fortunate. The rope bound him tightly. The car's terrifying speed and the circumstances made escape impossible. His face was torn apart by the rough ground, unrecognizable. The contrast was stark, one side representing survival through intelligence, the other a heartbreaking tragedy. Xana quickly covered his eyes, preventing him from seeing the horrific scene. Before they could recover from the shock, Xana's mother-in-law, Mary, in a state of madness, ran straight into the dangerous depths of the forest. Xana frantically searched for Mary. Elsewhere, Harrison, having narrowly escaped death, staggered through the woods. Suddenly, he saw a shy rabbit appear before him. Having just witnessed a terrifying scene, Harrison had lost all sympathy for these small furry creatures. That kick was like poking a hornet's nest, instantly attracting a swarm of rabbits. These rabbits, with their bloodshot eyes, aggressively charged towards Harrison. Forced to retreat, he felt as if 1,000 horses were galloping through his veins. A terrible premonition overwhelmed him. As he retreated further and further, tragedy struck when he fell straight into a bear trap. Before he could even cry out, the rabbits swarmed him and began gnawing at his body. This entire gruesome scene was vividly captured by a hidden camera in a tree, becoming another terrifying legend in the forest. Xana and Benji followed Mary to a dark and ominous place. Upon arriving, they heard her muttering something. Hearing it, Xana shuddered, for everything Mary imagined was a scene of tragedy and destruction. Just then, Xana was suddenly drawn to a beam of light ahead. It was Benji. She rushed towards her son. The ground was littered with animal bones. The air reeked of a nauseating stench. Benji squeezed his eyes shut in utter terror. Suddenly, Xana heard a loud noise growing closer. The giant deer had reappeared. It seemed determined to pursue them to the very end. Without thinking, Xana had no choice but to lead Mary and her son to continue their escape. These three frail, sick people seemed destined to perish here. Just at this critical moment, they encountered the hunters from before, including Michael. Along the way, Xana tried to tell him that there was still another person lost in the forest, Harrison, 15 years old. They needed to call the police, but she had no idea that the boy was now forever lost in the depths of the forest. Seeing Xana panicking and full of worry, Michael quickly reassured her. He advised her to go back to his camp to rest first, as they had a phone and satellite equipment there. Once everyone returned safely, they would find a way to contact the police to help her. Michael took them back to the camp, thinking it would be temporarily safe. But unexpectedly, they discovered Simon was also there, and even on the same side as the hunters. Benji, overjoyed to see his father again, shouted and ran to hug him. It's easy to imagine that there were always tense moments between Xana and Simon. They had plenty of reasons to have heated arguments, and this time was no exception. Xana immediately asked why Simon could associate with such people. He, in turn, felt she was being too harsh and didn't understand him. She continued to hope he could take some time to build a better relationship with their son. Benji desperately needed Simon's companionship, but the two kept arguing, each believing they were right and refusing to compromise. Poor Benji had to witness such family tension. He was deeply saddened, tears streaming down his face. Then, in anger, he turned and walked away. At that moment, Xana burst into Michael's room, intending to take his phone to call the police. Simon tried to stop her, believing that this impulsive act could put her in danger. As expected, Michael, with a nonchalant expression, pulled out a gun and pointed it at her. He coldly threatened that Simon might be lenient, but he wouldn't. He then ordered that if she didn't put down her phone, he would kill her immediately. Reluctantly, she handed over the phone. However, in that instant, Xana inadvertently glanced at their computer screen. She couldn't believe what she saw. It turned out that these people were planning to lure the giant deer from the forest to their location so they could capture both of them. This left Xana both enraged and horrified. She simply couldn't understand why they would be so reckless and insane. She stormed out of the room in anger. Suddenly, she discovered Benji had disappeared. Meanwhile, Mary was sitting alone on the sofa, looking worried. In his anger, Benji had inadvertently witnessed hunters struggling to carry a cage full of clay and then stopping. The scene that followed completely astonished him. The hunters were brazenly mistreating the fawn trapped in the cage. Their actions were both cruel and inhuman. They even said it was just a mindless, empty animal. Even more horrifying, Benji saw one of the hunters, while relieving himself, suddenly being struck down by a large fawn in a single blow. This showed the terrifying consequences of angering animals. At this point, Xana returned to the room and asked Mary if she knew where Benji was. Mary vaguely replied that he was on the hill. Xana continued to ask her to try to remember exactly where Benji had gone. The very next second, Mary spoke in a voice filled with panic. She only mentioned destruction. Without further delay, Xana rushed outside to find Benji. When she stepped out, she saw several people lying motionless in pools of blood. It was a scene of hell on earth. Seeing that his companions hadn't returned, one of the hunters became suspicious and went outside to look for them. But he hadn't gone many steps before the large deer caught up with him. Clearly, it was determined to avenge its offspring. Benji hid in the shadows and saw the hunters leave. He mustered his courage and secretly opened the cage to release the fawn. Despite his young age, the boy possessed a kind heart. He hugged the fawn and ran straight into the deep forest. The entire scene was captured by surveillance cameras. When the hunting boss saw Benji fleeing with the fawn, he was furious. He immediately grabbed his gun and went to find Benji for revenge. At this point, the large deer continued to pursue the remaining hunters, chasing them all the way to the camp. It showed no mercy, using its horns to gore and its hooves to trample relentlessly. In just a few moves, it finished off all the hunters. This demonstrated the unconquerable power of nature. The terrifying scene was like a raging inferno, utter chaos. In that perilous camp, Xana and Simon were still frantically searching for their missing son, Benji. They were completely unaware that the camp had been reduced to a chaotic mess. At this moment, only Mary remained alone in the house, waiting. After the giant deer sent the poachers to their deaths, it charged straight into the house. Surprisingly, it didn't attack Mary, but instead went straight to another female employee named Jo. Indeed, this deer seemed to have its own principles. It only attacked those who had harmed its child. Facing the colossal colossal deer, Joe panicked and fired several shots at it. Not only did she fail to repel the deer, but she also caused a fire. The raging flames quickly engulfed the wooden house. Thick black smoke billowed straight up into the sky. Outside, Benji saw the flames erupting from the camp and froze in fear. At that moment, the enraged poaching boss caught up and grabbed Benji, aggressively threatening him to hand over the fawn. Xana and Simon arrived just in time, but the poaching boss, Michael, pointed his gun at the three of them. He yelled hoarsely, demanding they give up the fawn. The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. At that very moment, the large deer finally appeared. It charged like an out-of-control tank, goring Michael with a single blow. As Michael was dying, he didn't forget to throw back the satellite phone to Xana's family. This was the only thing that represented hope at that moment. But the very next second, Xana and Simon were fighting over the phone. Simon tried his best to prevent Xana from calling the police, because if the truth were revealed, he would go to jail. Clearly, in the face of the law, even family ties become frighteningly fragile. Before the shock of the previous scene had even subsided, a new danger suddenly arose. The giant deer had returned. This time, its target was Benji. Seeing Benji once again facing peril, Xana's heart sank. However, in that critical moment, Simon revealed his cowardice. He performed an act that shocked everyone. He grabbed the phone Michael had left behind and ran away. Faced with this perilous situation, Xana immediately made a difficult decision. She told Benji that she would distract the deer so he could escape. The atmosphere instantly became more tragic than ever. For the two of them, this was a life or death choice. Just watching was enough to break anyone's heart. Just as tragedy seemed about to unfold, Xana suddenly discovered a crucial detail. She quickly realized the large deer wasn't actually planning an attack, but seemed to be searching for something. Its target was the fawn Benji had been holding. A glimmer of hope flashed. A rare tenderness appeared on Xana's face. She carefully cradled the fawn beside Benji. Then, to everyone's astonishment and suspicion, Xana gently led the fawn toward the angry, growling large deer. The large deer growled a few times at Xana and the others, but didn't attack. Perhaps it was just a warning to keep them away. Then it bent down and affectionately licked its fawn. The scene was filled with sacred maternal love, like a warm light illuminating the entire forest. But just as this moment of warmth arrived, tragedy struck. The hunter Mike suddenly came to his senses, grabbed his gun, and fired a burst of bullets at the large deer. Xana instantly collapsed. She let out a heart-wrenching scream. At that very moment, Mary unexpectedly transformed into a true queen of the battlefield. With a cold, ruthless shot, she struck the hunter in the head. No one could have imagined that the ultimate mastermind was none other than Mary herself. Meanwhile, Simon was driving his small car, preparing to escape, but he had a feeling something was wrong inside. He stopped to check, but found nothing unusual. When he turned around, a rabbit suddenly appeared in the car. It sat before him, staring back with a strange look in its eyes. Before Simon could react, the rabbit suddenly sprang up and transformed into a ferocious creature. It attacked him ferociously. These small animals were not to be underestimated. After all, Xana and Benji clung tightly to each other, feeling each other's warmth. Finally, the danger had passed, and the poor deer had fallen under the poacher's gun. Only the fawn was left to let out a mournful, desperate cry towards the night sky. That sound was so painful and heart-wrenching that it made one pause and reflect on how unfriendly this world truly is to small animals. And so, the film ends here. Thank you for watching. Please like and share widely so we can all look forward to new films with even more captivating and thrilling content.